With midterm elections just 21 days away and Republicans trying to maintain control of both houses of Congress, who are the 10 most vulnerable Democrats? We begin in the South with John Barrow of Georgia and John Spratt of South Carolina. There's also Maria Cantwell, Alan Monahan, and Debbie Stabenow. The next five shows two more Southerners, Chet Edwards of Texas, Jim Marshall in Georgia, Leonard Boswell of Iowa, Robert Menendez of New Jersey, and Melissa Bean of Illinois. So how will the Democrats try to overcome this vulnerability and win back power? Here to talk about it is John Gizzi, the political director for Human Events, the conservative publication that created this list. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
All right, just to remind people, a quick look at the House of Representatives shows that Democrats will need to pick up 15 seats to take control. While over in the Senate, Republicans would have to lose 6 seats if they were to hand over to control to Democrats. What's the likelihood of the House or the Senate changing hands at this point as you see it?
More so in the House than the Senate, Chris, but I'm going to go out on a limb today and predict while the numbers may change, the control will stay the same. And this is in large part because in the last census process, the states did their redistricting, the laying out of lines of districts, and sweetheart deals between the major parties were made in many states, California, Virginia, New Jersey, that essentially protected most incumbents. In fact, in the last election cycle, 98.7% of incumbents were reelected, the highest reelection rate since World War II. And the fact is, in the 20 seats where Republicans are relinquishing congressional districts, George Bush won them with an average of 57% of the vote in '04.
But when
this is the last line of defense.
If you look at all these scandals, though, that have been rocking Washington, many of them involving the Republicans, and prior to that, you had the Bob Woodward book, you have concerns about Iraq. You don't think there's going to be more of a shakeup this year than we might be used to?
No. As I said, I believe the district lines are the last line of defense for incumbents, and the last time I checked, there were more Republican incumbents than Democrats. In a sense, going along with these deals in the various states, Chris, Democrats were hoisted on their own petard. And frankly, if we were in a parliamentary system like Great Britain or Israel or Germany, yes, I would say they would have an impact. But individual districts reflect very individual tastes regarding the congressman and emphasis on local issues. The late Democratic Speaker.
When you look at the polls, people have had it with Congress. They don't trust Congress. They don't like the job they're doing. You don't sense anything out there of let's just clean house?
No, I don't sense it in the sense that when there was this feeling in 1994, and before that in the so-called Watergate year of 1974, there were also many incumbents who had grown lazy in the job, who became used to mailing in their reelection campaigns. And the fact is that the incumbents who are up this time are for the most part battle-tested. Yes, Heather Wilson of New Mexico and Jim Gerlach of Pennsylvania and Rob Simmons in my home state of Connecticut. All are considered very vulnerable. All have been considered vulnerable in the last election cycle. All survived.
All right, let's look, because we mentioned the Democrats. I want to look at your list of the Republicans who are fighting a fierce battle to keep control of both houses. It starts in Virginia, where Senator George Allen was once thought, frankly, to be unbeatable, and then that macaca comment began to erode his lead in the polls. Representatives John Doolittle of California, Eve Shabbat of Ohio, Rob Simmons of Connecticut, Missouri Senator Jim Talent, Mike DeWine of Ohio, Conrad Burns of Montana, Rick Santorum, Pennsylvania, in big trouble there. On the House side, I have Representatives John Hostetler and Don Sherwood. Let's talk about the GOP prospects here. In some of these key races, in Ohio, in Pennsylvania, do you really think people like Rick Santorum at this point can pull it out?
Well, Rick Santorum has an uphill fight. When you take strong stands on issues and stand for things that are sometimes controversial, you're always going to be fighting for re-election. I might add that Bob Casey, his opponent, has extremely high, almost universal name recognition as the son of a former governor of the state, and yet Mr. Casey was considered a big leader in the initial primary for governor 2 years ago. He lost badly to the man who is currently governor, Ed Rendell. He starts out strong, he finishes weak. and that may well be Rick Santorum's saving grace. I will concede Rick Santorum, as our list makes clear, is a very, very vulnerable incumbent.
And what about DeWine in Ohio and the Republicans yesterday, the national Republicans, basically pulling money out of that state?
Well, White House Press Secretary Tony Snow said the president is not writing Mike DeWine off. And remember, Mike DeWine is almost a terrier of a candidate. He knows how to raise money. He has raised almost as much as the national parties combined have given him, $4.6 million. And he's been an aggressive debater as an old lawyer, and he seems to be bouncing back in the polls.
You mentioned that the president said he still thinks that Mike DeWine can pull this one out, but do you
His
think
spokesman, Tony Snow, said that, Chris.
At the briefing. Do you think, though, that the president's endorsement or anything he can say or do, given again his approval ratings, which are back down. They went up slightly for a little while, and they're back down again. Do you think he could really influence any of these races?
Well, former Secretary of State James Baker has a saying that overnight is an eternity in politics. And while George W. Bush has, shall we say, modest standing in the polls, Chris, right now there are new concerns about national security, with North Korea apparently having a nuclear arsenal at this point. Concerns are growing about the world, and that's always been the president's strong suit. It was pivotal to his re-election in 2004. Bob Woodward concedes that in State of Denial. It helped Republicans make historic gains in 2002. And I don't see many people turning down the president's endorsement or asking him to stay out of their respective states.
John Gizzi, interesting discussion. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for having me, Chris. Look forward to doing it again.
Make MSNBC your homepage for politics.